In this video, I'm going to show you how to transform a standard Power BI matrix that looks like this into a more modern, contextual, and engaging matrix that looks like this, so you can give your users a better overall experience when using matrices. Let's jump in. Just a quick note, my tutorials are created with object interaction off, and I also have new card visual on. So if you want to follow along step by step, please adjust these settings in your Power BI reports if they're different. We're going to start off by creating our matrix page view background inside of PowerPoint. We're going to utilize layers and shapes in order to give our page view a more modern, professional feel with some depth. Now, once we've finished creating our background slide and then saved it as a PNG file, we can then load it into our Canvas section of our page like we see right here. In this example, however, I'm actually going to be creating a separate page view within the territory page. So I'm going to upload this image into a button, which is a little trick just to be able to have more than one background on the same page. I'm going to go to Insert, Button, Blank Button. Then I'm going to go to Format Your Button, General, Properties. I'm going to make the height 720 and the width 1280. So in order for this to work, I have to make sure the button height and width is the exact same dimensions as our PowerPoint slide. So if I were to go into the slide settings of my PowerPoint slide for this background, I would see the width and the height. And these are in inches in my case, but they're the equivalent of 1280 by 720. So if I type 1280 px, and then for the height, I type 720 px, it's going to convert it to inches, which is what I had here when I created the slide. Now I'm going to click on the button options, open up style. I'm going to scroll down, turn icon off and border off. We're going to turn on fill, open it, reduce the transparency to 0%, and then click browse. I'm going to select my background for the matrix and click open. We're going to make sure our selection pane is open and then drag that button to the very bottom of our selection groups. So now we can see we incorporated this secondary background into our territory page. Next, we're going to insert our matrix. Then I'm going to open up data. And for now, we're going to drag in the product category. Drag that into the rows. Next thing I'm going to do is make the height and the width of this matrix the same size roughly as our background box. I'm going to drag it all the way to the right, drag it all the way to the bottom, then we'll drag it all the way to the top. And if you have trouble seeing those boundaries, you can always zoom in to 200%. Now in this example, I actually want the height of this matrix to be a little smaller so I can fit buttons here at the top. So while I have that matrix selected, I'm going to go to Format Your Visual, General, Properties. I'm going to start by reducing the height by 45. So instead of 585, I'm going to type 540. Now what happened though is that my bottom positioning has changed. So I actually have to go into position now and increase the vertical by the same amount. So therefore I need to add 45 to this, which would be 150. That looks pretty good. I think that's plenty of room here for our buttons. All right, now it's time to start populating our matrix. I'm going to go to Data, and under my territory table, I'm going to drag in this RSM detailed field. And I'm going to make sure under visualizations, I have it in my rows, and it'll be the first row. Now notice how this field in particular is not only bringing in the retail sales manager's name, but it's also bringing in these two bullet point fields, labeling the region and country that the RSM belongs to. I'll show you how I did that. If I go to the table view, territory, click on this field, we can see that it's simply a calculated column. And the way I'm able to do the line breaks is by this function called unichar. So I'm just stringing up these fields, starting with the retail sales manager's name, followed by these two unichar line break functions. I threw 2 in here so I can have 2 line breaks. And then I brought in the region field and the country field. I threw in a little label in text format right before it. And I even threw in these little emojis to serve as bullet points. And I got those emojis from emojipedia.org. Simply came here, found the emoji I wanted, clicked copy, and then I pasted it into here. All right, next thing I'm going to do is bring in my RSM image URL shadow, which is simply another image version of the RSMs that applies a shadow. I'm going to drag it in right between category and RSM detailed. Now we can't see it yet, so I'm going to go to the matrix and right click on the first plus next to the first RSM name, expand all. Now we can see those images that I brought in. And the way I created these images and brought them into Power BI was first starting in PowerPoint, bringing the original image into PowerPoint, and then going to picture format, applying this soft edge oval, then going to format picture, removing the soft edges, and then applying a shadow effect called perspective below. Once I did that, I changed the height to 1 inch, and then I saved it as a PNG file. I then loaded those images onto a site called ibv.co. I then copied the image URL. I then added a field to the territory table, pasted those image URLs in on the same row for the managers they represent. Now that being said, this is for demonstration purposes only. I would not suggest using a public site like that for your company and client related reports. You would want a more secure hosting site for those images. Now once you have those URLs in Power BI in the right table, you also need to click on the field and change your data category to image URL. Okay, now it's time to bring in our measures. The first measure we're going to bring in is called units sold. We're going to bring it into our values field. And units sold is simply a sum of our order quantity from the facts table. Next, we're going to click in units sold and click add sparkline. For the x-axis, we're going to go into our date table, and I'm going to go with reporting period, which is a month-year period view. Then I'll click create. Next measure I want to add is my units sold month-over-month dynamic measure. I'm going to drag that measure into values. And if you want a complete breakdown of my month-over-month or year-over-year measures, you can check out this video right here called Master Dynamic Month-over-Month and Year-over-Year Percentage Variance DAX Measures. Now the next measure we're going to add is our variance period month-over-month measure. So we'll drag it right at the bottom of our values. And this measure provides the month comparison that our month-over-month percentage measure is representing. And this measure is also covered in the video I just referenced. Now the last measure we're going to add is units sold top product. Let's take a look at this measure real quick. Now this measure is pretty simple. What it's doing here is first creating a table that shows the total units sold at the product level. Then it captures the max units sold within that table, which will change based on the filter context of your report page. And then lastly, it displays the product name associated with that max units sold value. Again, all dependent on the filter context. All right, so now it's time to clean this up because we can see here it looks pretty messy. We're going to start off by going into visualizations, format your visual, general. We're going to open up properties and then padding. I'm going to zero out the padding for all 4 sides. I'm going to open up effects, turn the background off. Then I'm going to scroll up and click on the visual settings. We're going to work our way down. First, we'll open up layout and style presence. We're going to change the style to minimal and the layout to tabular. Next, we'll open up grid. We're going to turn off horizontal lines. We'll leave vertical lines off as well. Next, we're going to open up border. We're going to go through each selection and make sure there is no border applied. So I'm unchecking anywhere that I see a border. We'll open up options. I'm going to increase the row padding to 4, just to give our data a little more breathing room. We're going to turn blank rows on. Then we're going to open it up, and we're going to change the color to a very light gray. So F6, F6, F6. We'll leave border off. Now let's open up values. I'm going to go with a Sego UI font with a size of 10. For the text color, I'm going to go with this nice shade of black, so 333, 333. I'm going to make sure my alternate text color is the same, and we can leave text wrap on. Next, we'll open up column headers. I'm going to go with a Sego UI bold, and I'm going to change the size to 10. I want the color to be the same color, so 333, 333. And for the background color, I want it to be the same color as my blank rows. So this F6, F6, F6. We'll leave text wrap on. Next, we'll open up options and turn auto size width off. We'll keep working our way down here. So next, we're going to open up row headers. I'm going to make sure the font is Sego UI, and we'll lower the size to 10. Text color will be the same that we've been using. We can leave text wrap on, but for icons, we're actually going to shut that off. Let's keep scrolling down. We're going to turn column subtotals off. We're going to turn row subtotals off. We're going to scroll down. Next, we're going to open up specific column. And for all 6 measures, we're going to apply to header, subtotals, total, and values. So all of these should be on. And we're going to left align. I'm going to do the same thing for every measure that we have here. Next, we're going to open up cell elements. So for units sold, we're going to turn data bars on and then click FX. For the positive bar, I'm going to select this lighter shade of our theme color for units sold. So FFCFB8 for the hex code. The negative bar, I'm going to choose the exact same color and then click OK. Next, I'm going to select our month-over-month percentage measure. I'm going to turn background color on, click FX. Under Format Style, I'm going to select Rules. Make sure I'm on the right measure. We'll have 2 rows. All right, and we're going to say, if greater than or equal to min and less than 0, give us this light shade of red. Next, we'll say if greater than or equal to 0 and less than or equal to max, give us this light shade of green. Then we'll click OK. Now I'm going to take this a step further, enable icons, and click FX. We're going to apply the exact same conditional formatting. Now the only difference here is that we're going to use icons, so I'm going to select the red down triangle for the top row and the up green triangle for the bottom row. Same logic applies, and we'll click OK. All right, so our cell elements are all set. We'll keep working our way down and open up image size next. I think we can make these images a little bigger. So let's try 100 by 100. I think that looks really good because we do have enough space to incorporate an image of this size. Now we'll open up spark lines. We're going to leave the color our default orange that represents units sold. We're going to open up marker, and I'm going to check highest. So the marker will show the highest units sold period. I'm going to change the type to this triangle that aligns better with our branding. And we'll leave the size at 3, but I'm going to change the color to our default black so it stands out just a little more. All right, so next step would be to adjust our header names so they make sense to our users. So we'll first go into this RSM detailed header. We'll rename it Retail Sales Manager. For the image, we're going to delete the text completely, press spacebar, and then enter. We'll leave category as is, units sold as is. We can actually leave units sold by reporting period alone as well. For the month-over-month measure, we're going to simply name it MOM percentage. For the text-related month-over-month measure, we're going to name it month-over-month period. And for our last measure, we'll simply name it top product. All right, next thing we need to do is adjust the width of these columns so we don't have this horizontal scroll bar. I'm going to start at the left-hand side, and we don't want any text wrapping. So just make sure that everything within your field fits on one row. All right, that looks really good. Next thing I want to do is establish how I want to sort this matrix by default. I'm going to go with units sold in descending order. Now, if you really want to go the extra mile, which I do suggest, Check your margins. Make sure these blank rows in the header have roughly the same amount of margin. Also make sure on the bottom we don't have any table overlap, so everything fits nicely in this rounded corner shape. Now we could stop here, but I want to take this to another level. I want to create the same matrix 2 more times, one for gross sales and one for net profit. And I want the user to be able to click on a button here at the top left corner and toggle between the 3 views. So the first thing I need to do is go to Insert, Button, Blank Button. Drag the button right around here for now. We're going to open up Shape under Format Your Button. I'm going to change the shape to Rounded Tab Both Top. We'll leave the rounded top corners at 25%. Next, we'll open up Style. Under Default, I'm going to turn on Text and type Units Sold. We're going to change the font to Sago UI Bold. We'll underline it and lower the font size to 11. The font color will go with our default black. We're going to left horizontal align it. Leave the vertical alignment as middle. We're going to change the left padding to 45. We're going to zero out the other sides of the padding. We're going to leave icon on and expand it. I'm going to select Custom, Browse, and I'm going to bring in my Unit Sold button active icon. We'll leave the image fit to normal. We'll leave the horizontal alignment as left, the vertical alignment as middle, and we're going to change the padding to 2 around all 4 sides. And we'll change the icon size to 35 pixels. Now we're going to turn Fill on, expand it, lower the transparency to 0%, click on the color, and we're going to go with our very light shade of gray, so F6, F6, F6. We'll scroll down and turn Border on, expand it. For the border, we're going to go a little darker. So we're going to go with E6, E6, E6. So just a darker shade of gray with a 1 pixel for the width. Let's go up to our button and manually adjust the width. All right, so I think that looks good. And if you want to see my width, I went with a 145. Now we need to zoom in to 200%. And what we want to do is get rid of this bottom border. So it looks like this tab is actually part of our column header. In order to do that, we need to go to our selection pane and drag the button below the matrix. Now, if we click out, and be careful when you click out, you need to click out in the very left corner of the page, because remember, we used a button for our background. We can see that we still have that border. So I'm going to select the button and press the down arrow on my keyboard a couple times. Now we look good. We can see that it blends in perfectly with our column header. So I'm going to leave it right there. Next, I'm going to select that button and duplicate it 2 times. Control C, Control V, Control V. Drag these over here. I'm going to manually adjust the spacing of the middle one. And we don't want to overlap the first button. We want to leave a little space in between. Then I'll do the same thing for our third button. Drag it over here. And once we have that same spacing, I'm going to hold Control, select all 3, go to Format, Align Top, Align Distribute horizontally, click out over here, and then make sure those buttons are below the matrix. Let's go ahead and zoom back to 100%. Click on that middle button, open up Style. We're going to change this to Gross Sales. Click on the next one, change that to Net Profit. Go back to our gross sales and adjust the look of this. So we want these 2 buttons to the right to be the inactive buttons. So we don't want to spotlight them. So for the default state for gross sales, I'm actually going to change this to Sago UI, get rid of the underline. I'm going to change the icon to my inactive gross sales icon, so it's this gray one. And I'm also going to change the fill to the color white. So that looks good, but now I want a hover effect when the user hovers over it. So I'm going to scroll up and change the state to on hover And for this, I'm going to change the font to Sago UI semi-bold. We'll change the icon back to our blue one, and now we can see what that looks like when we hover over it. We'll even take this a step further and change the state on press, change the font to Sago UI bold, underline. We'll change the color back to our active button color, and we got to change the icon as well. So we'll go back and select our default blue. Now let's test that out. All right, that looks really good. Now next we would need to do the same steps to the net profit button. So I'm going to do that right now. All right, so now our net profit button and gross sales buttons are both all set. All right, so this will be our units sold view. So we need to group all of these buttons and layers together into one group. I'm going to drag the background button up here, hold Control, select all of those layers, group them, drag it to the bottom, and then I'm going to rename the group and rename the layers below. We need to make sure the matrix is the first layer and our background is the last layer. So I'll do that right now. All right, so we can see that I named the entire group, group_units. We have our matrix. We have our navigation, which I threw into a subgroup called group_nav. I named the units sold button units active, and these last two buttons, this one actually has to say inactive. So these last two buttons are inactive. Next thing we'll do is duplicate this group, drag it to the bottom. We'll name this one sales, copy it again, drag that one to the bottom, name this one profit. And then the last steps would be to simply work our way down, adjust our sales group, and switch out measures related to units sold with the gross sales. For the profit one, we would switch out those units sold measures with the net profit measures. We would also need to adjust the buttons and make sure, for example, in our gross sales view, the gross sales button would be the one that looks active. The other two would be inactive. And we would do the same for the net profit view. Now, I'm not going to cover that in this video. If you're interested in how to do that, please check out my video shown here on bookmarks. It'll show you exactly how you can achieve that. All right, so we can see here that we have our gross sales view now. And like I said, all I did is work my way down. We can see here that the three buttons within this group were renamed, and the sales button was switched out to look active, and the units was switched out to look inactive. Within the matrix, we had to switch out unit sales with gross sales. We had to edit our spark line to be for gross sales. We had to switch out our units sold month over month with our gross sales month over month. And we had to switch out our units sold top product with gross sales top product. Then lastly, we had to go through our settings and do slight tweaks. So for example, with our gross sales, we needed to make sure that the data bars were for gross sales with a different color. We needed to make sure our month over month measure was representing the gross sales month over month and not units sold. And we had to make sure our spark lines were the default color for the metric, in this case blue for gross sales. And lastly, we had to adjust the width of the columns, try to mirror the width of units sold. And what I like to do is just quickly show and hide the other group, and then try to adjust the width to mirror that, so when the user clicks on these buttons, it's a clean transition. Then after I did sales, I had to do the same for net profit. So we have net profit, gross sales, units sold. After those views were created, I had to create the bookmarks. We have matrix units, matrix sales, matrix profit. We have 9 buttons in total, 3 per group. So for each of those buttons, we had to assign the appropriate bookmark. This one's for the profit view, this one's for the sales view, and this one's for units sold. As we can see, those buttons work as they should. Now we could stop right here, but there's one last thing I think I want to add. Because we're not incorporating subtotals here, I think I want to add a overall total in the top right corner. So I'm going to go to Insert, Text, and then click Value. This one's going to be for units sold. So I'm going to type units sold, select it, and notice how it selected the measure that I already have created. I'm going to name it units sold, and then click Save. Now the underline will only show up in desktop, but when you publish this to service, you won't see that underline. Next, we're going to type units sold. We'll put a dash, open parenthesis, then I'm going to click value again. For this one, I'm going to find my reporting period date range. So that's the name of the measure, so I'm going to select it. We'll name it period, and I can see the result below is exactly what I want. So I have the right measure here. I'm going to click Save. Go to this text box, expand it a little bit, make the height smaller. I think I want units sold bold. We'll go over to Format Text, Properties, Effects, turn background off. We're going to drag it over here. We're going to right align it. We'll place it right in the middle. We'll manually vertically align it with the white space that it's on. We'll make sure we have that right parenthesis. We'll click out. Then we'll open up our selection pane, rename the text box, open up our group for units, place the text box right above our background button. Because we don't want it above our matrix in case it blocks the options in the top right corner of the matrix table. And because we grouped our layers, this will automatically show within the bookmark for units sold, like we can see right here. Now I'm going to simply duplicate that process for gross sales and net profit. All right, so now we can see in the selection pane, we have our 3 text boxes, all representing these 3 different insights, and they are in the group and showing when we select our page view. So now if the user were to select a manager by simply clicking on the name or using our slicer here at the top, we can see that the total units sold will populate. All right, so I really hope you found value in this tutorial on how to transform your Power BI matrices into more modern, engaging, user-friendly ones. Now, if you found these tips helpful, feel free to subscribe, click the notification button. That way you'll be notified when I come out with additional videos related to Power BI UX UI design. If you have any requests for certain quick tip videos, feel free to leave them in the comments. And then lastly, if you're looking for a course on advanced Power BI UX UI design, feel free to check out the description where I have a link to my new course, 14 Days to Mastering Power BI UX UI Design.